We would like to thank you all for being here tonight. It seems to me that today, very few people know about the making of the U.S. Constitution and the men who dedicated themselves to it. These men came from all corners of the country, from different backgrounds, different religions, and they came together in one building to determine how to best manage a union of 13 very independent states. For days, weeks, and months, they debated, agreed, and disagreed, while the nation's future hung in the balance. And by the time they were finished, one weak government had been disposed of, one plan rejected, one great compromise made, and one constitution was written for the peoples of America. They, along with the help of God, ensured that the United States was, and would continue to be, the greatest nation on earth. This, then, is their story. The year was 1777. America had just freed herself from the tyrannous reign of England. The Declaration of Independence was written and signed, and the values and principles expressed in the Declaration were soon to become the foundation for one of the greatest nations the world had ever seen. The Declaration of Independence clearly stated the beliefs of the founders, that all men are created equal, that the people are endowed by their Creator, yes, by God, and not by government, with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that governments exist to secure these rights, that the governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish government. And in 1777, the Articles of Confederation were agreed upon and submitted to the states. After a hard-fought victory over Britain, the United States was on her way. Yet, as time went on, major flaws in the Articles began to be exposed. The Confederation was missing many things necessary to create a stable union. It lacked sufficient power to enforce treaties, respect from abroad, political power, power to levy taxes, a stable currency, power to regulate trade and commerce, and unity among the states. It also suffered from much social unrest. So a convention was called to meet at the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia on May 14, 1787, where they attempted to revise the Articles of Confederation. It soon became obvious that no amount of revising could make the Articles of Confederation meet the needs of the country. The members of the convention were at a loss as to what to do next. The Articles were obviously not the answer to a strong and stable government, yet they had nothing else. The Articles were discarded, and weeks of deliberation followed, as they argued over the two basic questions. 1, what kind of government would achieve their objectives? And 2, how were they to balance the economic and political differences within the nation? A plan formulated by James Madison was submitted to the convention by the Virginia delegation on May 29th. It soon became known as the Virginia Plan. It provided for a strong central government with power to coerce the states, but it guaranteed the existence of each state. The central power was to guarantee a republican form of government and the territory of each state. The Virginia Plan favored the larger states, but recommended that representation in Congress be proportional based upon the free white population. It proposed a legislature of two houses, the lower house elected by the people, and the upper house elected by the lower house. The delegates became involved in a debate over the principles of government set forth in the Virginia Plan. The debate soon became very bitter and lasted for a time of 2 weeks. The small states vehemently opposed the Virginia Plan. They feared a strong central government and were concerned with the preservation of the power of individual states. The delegation of New Jersey presented the small state plan on June 15th. It became known as the New Jersey Plan. It proposed that the powers of government be retained by the states and that a single-house Congress be created, in which all states were equally represented. The small states felt this fixed the problems found in the Virginia Plan, which, if adopted, would have given Virginia 16 delegates and Rhode Island only 1. The Virginia Plan thoroughly frightened the small states, yet the New Jersey Plan they proposed left the character of Congress unchanged. It was simply the Articles of Confederation patched up. The New Jersey Plan was defeated, but heated debates between the larger and smaller states continued. 2 weeks later, the Constitutional Convention was literally on the verge of breaking apart over the issue of representation. There seemed to be nothing that would satisfy both the large and small states, and on June 28, Benjamin Franklin called for prayer on the issue.
In the beginning of the contest with Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayers in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us, engaged in the struggle, must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. Have we now forgotten this powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of man. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid?
Franklin's speech calling for daily prayers marked the turning point of the Constitutional Convention. Breakthroughs soon followed. The men started working with the ideas of the Virginia Plan to lay out the tenets of a new Constitution. The 55 men who attended the convention were men of wealth and of property, as well as keen thinkers, successful in both public and private affairs. They were merchants, moneylenders, planters, ship owners, lawyers, and educators. And despite differences in opinion resulting from their private interests, there were some matters about which they held common opinion. They stood for the protection of private property, a stronger central government and a stabilized monetary system, and maintenance of law and order. It was a practical group of men, the majority of whom had fairly reasonable views. As the founders began to build upon the strong foundation already established in the Declaration of Independence, they based the Constitution on the following essential principles. The basic biblical principles of virtue and knowledge. The rule of law. The consent of the governed. Individual rights. Private property and capitalism. Union. And representation. But when it came to representation, the convention again broke out in heated debates. And on July 2nd, a vote of equality was taken on equality of representation in the Senate. The vote was tied, and the convention seemed to be at a total standstill yet again. Finally, upon the suggestion of Governor Morris, a committee consisting of one delegate from each state was appointed to work out a compromise. Benjamin Franklin, as a member of the committee, introduces a compromise to the convention on July 5th. It soon became known as the Great Compromise and was Franklin's last great service to his country. The Great Compromise was adopted on July 16th. It provided for a national Congress of 2 houses. In the Senate, each state was given 2 representatives, therefore satisfying the small states' desire for equal representation. And the House of Representatives favored the larger states, as representation was based upon population. The crisis had passed. The issue of representation was settled once and for all. The convention moved forward as they agreed to the idea of separation of powers, establishing legislative, judicial, and administrative branches of government that would check and balance each other. And on Monday morning, September 17th, the delegates came together for the last session. They were not overly enthusiastic. Although the convention had voted to adopt the Constitution, it was a solemn group that came together to sign it. The last important act of the convention was signing the Constitution. Washington signed first, and the others followed. The convention adjourned after the document was signed. The doors of the meeting room were opened, and the product of 4 months' work was ready to present to the curious Americans. What kind of government have you created?
A republic, if you can keep it.
As things began to progress within the nation, the people began to fear their new government. They worried that the power given to the government would impede upon the rights of the people and the state legislatures. The nation as a whole distrusted natural centralization of power. They wanted certain rights of the people to be permanently protected in case elected and appointed officials did not use virtue and wisdom in governing. In short, they felt there needed to be some specific limits to the power of government. In response, Congress passed the first 10 amendments to the new Constitution on September 25, 1789. These 10 amendments consist of rights and freedoms for the peoples of the United States. Rights were also given to the federal government and to the state legislatures. These, then, are those rights: the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, the right to bear arms, the right to refuse quarter to soldiers, freedom from unreasonable search and seizure, freedom from double jeopardy, freedom from self-incrimination, the right to due process of law, right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury, right to an attorney when charged with a crime, freedom from excessive fines, and freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. States' rights: the right to establish state militias, the right to regulate local government, and the right of police power to enforce state law. Federal rights: the right of taxation, the right to regulate commerce, the right to establish a military to provide for the common defense, the right to coin money, the right to establish post offices, the right to issue patents, the right to wage war, and the right to form treaties with other nations. The 10th Amendment may have been one of the most important ones. It specified that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, were reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. The Constitution and the newly ratified Bill of Rights would serve as a check on the size and scope of government. It truly put the people in control of their republic.
Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our